The massive spaceport on planet Nexus Prime was like a giant metal city floating in space. Thousands of strange beings walked through its long corridors and waiting areas. Ships from every corner of the galaxy landed and took off every few minutes, making the ground shake with their powerful engines. The air smelled like fuel and metal, and the sounds of different alien languages mixed together into a constant buzzing noise. In the far corner of Terminal 7 near the old broken seats sat a group of human refugees. They looked tired and scared. Their clothes were torn and dirty. Their faces showed the pain of people who had lost everything they ever loved. These humans had escaped from their home planet just weeks ago when the Galactic enforcement corps had attacked their world. Among these refugees sat a 16-year-old boy named Kim Tae. He had black hair that fell across his dark brown eyes. His clothes were too big for his thin frame, and there were holes in his shoes. Tae held an old datapad in his hands, trying to read an old Earth story to keep his mind off their terrible situation. Next to him sat his little sister, Min Ah, who was only 8 years old. She had the same dark hair as her brother, but her eyes were red from crying too much. The other humans in their group included an older woman named So Young, who used to be a teacher before their world was destroyed. There was also a young man named Hyo Jin, who had been a medical student and was now trying to take care of the sick and injured refugees with whatever supplies he could find. All of them had lost family members in the attack on their planet. All of them were now homeless and alone in a galaxy that seemed to hate them for simply being human. Commander Vextar stood at the other end of the terminal, watching the humans with disgust in his red glowing eyes. He was a member of the Saurian Empire, one of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy. Standing 8 feet tall, his body was covered in black scales that looked like armor. His claws were as long as kitchen knives, and his tail swept back and forth, showing his anger. The uniform he wore had many medals, showing his high rank in the Galactic Enforcement Corps. The commander believed that humans were dangerous creatures that needed to be controlled or destroyed. He had spent most of his military career hunting down human settlements and making sure they could never grow strong enough to threaten the other races in the galaxy. To him, humans were nothing more than violent animals that bred too quickly and caused problems wherever they went. As Vextar watched the refugees, he felt his anger growing. The sight of these humans sitting in his station made his blood boil. In his culture, humans were considered the lowest form of life, barely better than the parasites that lived in the sewers of his homeworld. The fact that they were allowed to use the same facilities as civilized beings was an insult to everything. He believed Inmin. A stomach made loud growling noises as she pressed her small hands against her belly. She had not eaten anything in 2 days, and the hunger was making her feel sick, and dizzy tears started flowing down her cheeks as she tried to stay quiet, but the pain was too much for a little girl to handle. Her soft crying started to get louder as she could not control herself anymore. The sound of the crying child reached Commander Vextar's ears, and his mood became even worse. The noise was disturbing other passengers in the terminal, and he could see some of the more important alien travelers looking annoyed. Several wealthy merchants and government officials were staring at the human group with obvious displeasure. Tae noticed his sister crying and quickly put his arm around her, trying to comfort her. He whispered soft words in her ear and rubbed her back gently, the way older brothers do when they want to protect their little sisters. He looked around, hoping to find some food or water for her, but they had already used up their last credits days ago. Suddenly, the temperature in the terminal seemed to drop as Commander Vextar began walking toward the human group. His heavy footsteps echoed off the metal walls and floor, making a sound like thunder. Each step was slow and deliberate, showing that he was in no hurry because he knew no one would dare to stop him. Other aliens in the terminal quickly moved out of his way, not wanting to get involved in whatever was about to happen. The commander's towering figure cast a long shadow over the seated humans as he approached them. His red eyes glowed brighter with anger, and his claws made scratching sounds against his uniform as his hands clenched into fists. The smell of his alien body reached the humans before he did, a strange mix of metal and something that reminded them of burning plastic. Other refugees in the group immediately recognized the danger. They had seen what happened when Galactic Enforcement Corps officers got angry at humans. It never ended well for the humans involved. So Young grabbed Hyo Jin's arm and tried to pull him away from the approaching alien, but there was nowhere to run in the crowded terminal. Vextar stopped directly in front of the human group and looked down at them like they were insects that had crawled into his home. His voice was deep and rough like grinding metal. When he spoke, carrying the authority of someone who was used to being obeyed without question by everyone around him. "Quiet, you pathetic creatures," he snarled at them, showing his sharp teeth. His words were filled with such hatred that several of the humans flinched and moved back in their seats. The way he said pathetic made it sound like the worst insult possible. The other refugees immediately fell silent, understanding that their lives might depend on not making this alien any angrier than he already was. Even the adults in the group lowered their eyes and tried to make themselves as small as possible, hoping that the commander would just go away and leave them alone. But Minna was too young to understand the danger and too hungry to stop crying. Her sobs continued echoing through the terminal as her empty stomach cramped. With pain, she buried her face in her brother's shoulder, but the crying did not stop. Tay felt his heart beating faster as he realized what was happening. He had heard stories about what Galactic enforcement Corps officers did to humans who annoyed them. The stories were not good ones. He knew he should stay quiet and try to calm his sister down, but looking at her pain-filled face made something inside him refuse to stay silent. Slowly, Tay stood up from his seat, placing himself between the massive alien commander and his crying sister. His legs felt shaky and his mouth was dry, but he forced himself to stand straight and look up at the towering creature before him. Even though he was scared, he kept his voice steady when he spoke. "She is just hungry," he said calmly, though his heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "We have not eaten in 2 days." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment as Commander Vextar processed what had just happened. A human, a member of what he considered the most worthless species in the galaxy, had just spoken to him without permission, had just dared to address him as if they were equals in Saurian culture. Speaking to a superior without being given permission first was considered one of the worst possible insults. It was something that could result in immediate punishment or even death. The fact that this insult had come from a human made it 1,000 times worse. Vextar's red eyes narrowed to thin slits as rage filled every part of his being. His claws extended fully and his tail began lashing back and forth like an angry snake. The scales on his neck stood up, making him look even more dangerous than before. Without any warning and faster than most humans could see, Commander Vextar's massive clawed hand swung through the air toward Tay. The blow carried all the strength of a trained warrior and all the anger of someone who felt their honor had been insulted. The sound of the impact echoed through the terminal like a gunshot, making everyone within hearing distance freeze in shock. The impact of Commander Vextar's massive hand hitting Tay was like being struck by a metal club. The force of the blow should have sent the 16-year-old boy flying across the terminal floor and probably broken several bones in his face. But something strange happened in that moment of contact, something that had never happened before in the recorded history of the galaxy. Tay stumbled backward from the hit, but he did not fall. Blood trickled from his nose and his cheek was already starting to swell, but he remained standing. His dark hair had fallen across his face, hiding his eyes from everyone watching. The entire terminal had gone completely silent, as if someone had turned off all the sound in the universe. Even the constant humming of the space station machinery seemed to quiet down as every living being within 100 meters felt something changing in the air around them. It was like the moment before a terrible storm when the wind stops blowing and all the animals hide because they sense danger coming. Minna stopped crying immediately, her young mind somehow understanding that something very important was happening to her brother. So young, the older woman felt her skin prickle with an energy she had never experienced before. Hyo Jin, the former medical student, noticed that his hands were shaking even though he was not afraid. Other aliens throughout the terminal began to feel uncomfortable without knowing why. Some of the smaller species started making nervous sounds, while the larger predator races found themselves looking around for threats they could not identify. Several alien children began crying, and their parents quickly picked them up and started moving toward the exits. Commander Vextar stood frozen in place, staring at the human boy he had just struck. Something was very wrong here. The boy should have been unconscious or at least screaming in pain. Instead, he was just standing there, perfectly still, like he was thinking about something very important. Tay slowly reached up and wiped the blood from his nose with the back of his hand when he lifted his head and looked at Commander Vextar. Everyone in the terminal gasped in shock and terror. His eyes were no longer the dark brown they had been just moments before. They were now glowing with a bright silver light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The light was not just in his eyes, but seemed to be coming from somewhere deep inside him, like there was a star burning in his chest. The silver glow was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, making everyone who saw it feel like they were looking at something that should not exist in the normal universe. You should not have done that, Tay said softly, but his voice had changed completely. It now carried a strange echo that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The words reached every corner of the terminal, even though he was barely speaking above a whisper. The sound of his voice made Commander Vextar take an involuntary step backward, something that had never happened to him before in 30 years of military service. He was a trained warrior who had faced down armies and space monsters, but this human boy was making him feel afraid in a way he had never experienced. What are you? The commander stammered, his earlier arrogance completely gone. His voice cracked like a teenage boy, even though he was a full-grown alien warrior. The proud stance he always maintained was starting to crumble as fear crept up his spine. Tay took a single step forward, and something impossible happened. The metal floor beneath his feet began to glow red-hot, as if his body was generating enough heat to melt steel. The air around him started to shimmer like it does above a hot road in summer, and a strange humming sound filled the terminal. I am exactly what your species has been hunting for the past 1,000 years, Tay replied, and with each word his voice grew stronger and more confident. The silver light in his eyes was getting brighter, making it hard for anyone to look directly at him. I am what you have been trying to destroy since you first learned we existed around the terminal. Other aliens began backing away in panic. Some of them recognized what they were seeing from ancient legends and stories. Their grandparents had told them stories about beings of incredible power who had once ruled the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing millions of years ago. The more sensitive alien species started to whimper and make distress calls as waves of energy rolled off Tay's body like heat from a furnace. Several of the telepathic races grabbed their heads in pain as they felt thoughts and memories that were not their own flooding into their minds. Group of crystalline beings near Gate 12 began to resonate with musical tones that sounded like church bells. Their bodies were naturally attuned to energy fields, and they could sense that whatever was happening to this human boy was beyond anything in their scientific understanding. The Galactic Enforcement Corps had training protocols for dealing with many different types of threats. They knew how to handle rebellions and alien monsters and even natural disasters, but nothing in their extensive military education had prepared them for this moment. Commander Vextar's hand moved toward his weapon, but when he tried to grab it, his fingers would not obey his commands. It was as if his own body was refusing to threaten this glowing human boy. His hand shook violently as he struggled to make it move, but it remained frozen in place. The silver light emanating from Tay's eyes was growing brighter with each passing second, and with it came an overwhelming feeling that pressed down on every guilty conscience in the vicinity. It was like having someone look directly into your soul and see every bad thing you had ever done. Minna stared at her brother in wonder rather than fear, somehow understanding that he was still the same person who had always protected her, but that he had become something more, something that had always been sleeping inside him, waiting for the right moment to wake up. So young, felt memories stirring in the back of her mind, things her grandmother had told her when she was very young, stories about the old days when humans could do impossible things before something happened to make them forget who they really were. Hyojin watched in amazement as small sparks of energy began dancing between his own fingers, as if Tay's transformation was awakening something in all the humans present. His medical training told him this was impossible, but his eyes could not deny what he was seeing. Other humans throughout the spaceport were beginning to feel strange sensations as well. A human family waiting at Gate 20 found that their young son eyes had started glowing with a faint golden light. A human engineer working in the maintenance tunnels discovered that he could suddenly see and understand alien technology that had been confusing him for years. The transformation was not limited to just Tay, but seemed to be spreading to every human in the area, as if his awakening was triggering something that had been dormant in all of their DNA for countless generations as the silver light around Tay continued to grow stronger. The metal walls of the terminal began to vibrate with a low musical note that seemed to come from the very structure of the space station itself. It was as if the ancient technology that built this place remembered something it had forgotten long ago. Commander Vex Tar felt his knees growing weak as the full reality of what he was witnessing began to sink into his mind. This was not just some human with unusual abilities. This was something far more significant, something that would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. The silver light surrounding Tay continued to pulse and grow brighter, as if his body was becoming a living star. The air in the terminal crackled with energy that made everyone's hair stand on end and caused the lights overhead to flicker and dim. Electronic devices throughout the spaceport began to malfunction as the power emanating from the human boy interfered with their circuits. Commander Vextar's hands were shaking so badly now that he could barely stand upright. His red eyes were wide with terror as he stared at this impossible sight before him. Every instinct in his warrior body was screaming at him to run, but his legs felt like they were made of stone. You see, Tay continued, speaking in that otherworldly voice that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. Humans are not just another species you can push around. We are the descendants of the ancient ones your people call the creators. The words hit every alien in the terminal like a physical blow that knocked the air from their lungs. The creators were legendary beings spoken of in whispered stories across every civilization in the galaxy. They were the mythical race that had supposedly created most of the technology and even seeded life on countless worlds. Before vanishing without a trace billions of years ago, every alien child grew up hearing tales about the creators, but they were always treated as fairy tales or religious myths. No one believed they had actually existed, and certainly no one thought their descendants might still be alive somewhere in the universe. A group of elderly Zephyrian scholars near Gate 15 began to chant in their ancient language as they recognized symbols of power that matched descriptions from their oldest religious texts. Their 6 arms moved in complex patterns as they tried to process what they were witnessing. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd as beings from dozens of different species realized what this meant. The humans they had been treating as primitive refugees were actually the children of gods, the same humans their governments had been systematically hunting and destroying for centuries. So Young felt her mind expanding as long-buried memories began surfacing from deep within her genetic code. She remembered now why her grandmother had always insisted that humans were special, why the old woman had told stories about ancestors who could move mountains and command the stars themselves. The memories were not just her own, but seemed to belong to thousands of generations of humans stretching back through time. She could see flashes of vast cities that floated in space, of humans who could travel between worlds with just a thought of technology so advanced. They seemed like magic. Jin gasped as similar memories flooded his consciousness. He saw images of human healers who could cure any disease with a touch, of human builders who constructed wonders that lasted for millions of years, of human explorers who mapped every corner of the galaxy in ships that moved faster than light itself. Even little Min-Ah was experiencing the awakening as her young mind was filled with knowledge and understanding far beyond her 8 years. She could suddenly sense the emotions of every being in the terminal, feeling their fear and wonder and confusion all mixed together. The other aliens in the spaceport were beginning to panic as the implications of this discovery sank in. If humans really were descended from the creators, then every act of violence against them had been an act of blasphemy against the gods themselves. The guilt and terror of this realization was overwhelming. A massive Gorlick trader dropped to his knees as he remembered all the human slaves he had bought and sold over the years. His forearms covered his face as he wept for forgiveness from beings he now understood were his superiors in every way. Several members of different military forces found themselves unable to stand as they thought about the human worlds they had helped destroy, the families they had torn apart, the children they had orphaned. All of it had been crimes against the descendants of their creators. Commander Vextar felt the weight of his entire career crushing down on him. Every human settlement he had raided, every human ship he had destroyed, every human life he had taken had been an unforgivable sin against the very beings who had given life to the galaxy. Impossible, he whispered, but even as the word left his mouth, he knew it was not impossible at all. Deep in his genetic memory were instincts that recognized the power before him, instincts that told him to kneel before beings of such majesty. The silver aura around Tay was now so bright that it was difficult to look directly at him, but somehow no one could look away. Where his feet touched the metal floor, intricate patterns of light began spreading outward, like living circuits that pulsed with each beat of his heart. These patterns were not random, but formed complex geometric designs that seemed to contain vast amounts of information. Several alien scientists in the crowd recognized them as mathematical formulas and star charts and blueprints for technologies beyond their understanding. The very structure of the space station began to respond to Tay's presence as if it recognized him as its rightful owner. Hidden systems that had been dormant for millions of years started to activate throughout the facility. Lights began glowing in sections that had been dark for so long that current maps did not even show they existed. Ancient machinery deep in the station core hummed to life for the first time since the station was built. The alien engineers who maintained the facility watched in shock as their instruments detected power levels that should have been impossible. Energy was flowing through conduits they had never known existed back in the terminal. The transformation was spreading to other humans as their dormant genetic heritage began to awaken. A human janitor who had been cleaning nearby found that he could suddenly understand and control the station systems with just a thought. A human mother holding her baby discovered that she could sense danger from across the station and somehow knew exactly where every threat was located. Her child began glowing with a soft golden light that made everyone who saw it feel peaceful and protected. The awakening was not violent or destructive, but instead filled with a sense of rightness and belonging, as if the universe itself was sighing with relief that its rightful guardians had finally returned. The humans were not using their newfound powers to seek revenge or cause harm, but instead seemed naturally inclined toward healing and protection. Tay looked around at the terrified aliens surrounding him, and his expression softened slightly. The angry silver fire in his eyes dimmed to a gentle glow as he saw their fear and understood their confusion. "We never wanted to rule over you," he said in a voice that now carried warmth instead of threat. "We only wanted to live in peace. But you would not let us." His words carried the weight of centuries of suffering as he spoke for all the humans who had died simply for being born the wrong species. All the children who had grown up without homes, all the families torn apart by wars they had never asked forth. Assembled aliens felt every moment of that pain as if it were their own, and many of them began to weep openly as they finally understood the magnitude of what their species had done. As the full weight of what he was witnessing crashed down upon him, Commander Vextar felt his legs give out completely. The proud warrior who had never shown weakness in front of anyone collapsed to his knees on the cold metal floor, his scaled hands pressed against the ground as his entire body shook with terror and shame. The realization of what his species had done was like a poison spreading through his mind. For centuries, the Galactic Enforcement Corps had been hunting down human settlements across the galaxy. They had told themselves they were protecting civilized species from a dangerous and primitive race. But now, faced with undeniable proof of humanity, true heritage, Vextar understood the horrible truth. They had not been preventing a threat, they had been committing genocide against the children of gods. The silver light pulsing from Tay's body began to affect the commander in ways that went beyond simple fear. Waves of energy washed over him, carrying with them memories and emotions that were not his own. He began to experience every moment of loss, every death of a human at alien hands, every destroyed world and scattered family. Through this connection, Vextar saw the attack on Tay's home planet from the perspective of the victims. He felt the terror of human children as alien warships appeared in their sky. He experienced the desperation of human parents trying to protect their families as their cities burned around them. The commander saw human refugees fleeing through space in damaged ships with no food or water, watching their loved ones die from injuries and illness, while alien patrols hunted them like animals. He felt the loneliness of human children who grew up in hiding, never knowing if they would live to see another day. Each memory hit him like a physical blow, and he could not escape them or push them away. The connection forced him to experience decades of human suffering in just a few minutes, and the pain was more than his mind could handle. Please, he gasped as tears streamed down his scaled face. I did not know, none of us knew. His proud warrior facade crumbled completely as he felt the echoes of millions of innocent deaths weighing down on his soul. The medals on his uniform that had once filled him with pride now felt like chains dragging him down toward the floor around the terminal. Other aliens were experiencing similar breakdowns as the truth spread through the crowd like wildfire. Some of them had never directly harmed humans, but they had supported governments and policies that made human persecution possible. Others had actively participated in raids and attacks thinking they were serving a noble cause. A group of Centaurian diplomats who had voted to exclude humans from galactic treaties found themselves sobbing uncontrollably as they realized they had helped condemn an entire species to exile and death. Their forelegs could not support them as guilt overwhelmed their minds. Several alien merchants who had profited from selling human slaves or buying goods stolen from destroyed human colonies began tearing at their clothes and crying out for forgiveness. The wealth they had accumulated from human suffering now felt like poison in their hands. The few humans present in the terminal looked on in amazement as their former oppressors were brought low by nothing more than the truth of what they truly were. It was a sight none of them had ever imagined they would see. The mighty alien races that had hunted them for so long reduced to broken beings begging for mercy. Tay's sister, Minna, approached her brother carefully, no longer afraid but filled with wonder. The golden glow in her own eyes was growing stronger as her abilities continued to manifest. She could feel the pain of all the aliens around them, and surprisingly she felt sorry for them. Brother, she whispered in a voice that carried new wisdom, how long have you known what we really are? I did not know until he struck me, Tay replied, looking down at the sobbing form of Commander Vextar. The anger, the need to protect you, it awakened something that was always there, sleeping in our blood, waiting for the right moment. So Young stepped forward, her own transformation making her appear years younger as ancient knowledge filled her mind. She understood now why humans had always felt different, why they had always seemed to adapt so quickly to alien technology, why they could survive on worlds that should have been hostile to them. We were made to be guardians, she said softly, her voice carrying the authority of recovered memories. Not rulers, but protectors. We were meant to help all species grow and learn, but fear made them try to destroy us instead. Jin was examining his glowing hands with wonder as he discovered he could sense injuries and illnesses in the aliens around him. His medical training was being enhanced by genetic memories of healing techniques that were far more advanced than anything taught in modern schools. I can help them, he said, looking at several aliens who had been injured in the panic. His healing abilities were calling to him, urging him to ease their pain, even though these same species had been hunting his people for generations. The response of the awakened humans to their newfound power was exactly what the ancient genetic programming had intended. Instead of seeking revenge or using their abilities to dominate, they instinctively wanted to heal and protect even those who had wronged them. This natural inclination toward mercy made the watching aliens feel even more ashamed of their actions. They could see that even with godlike power, the humans remained fundamentally good, choosing compassion over vengeance at every opportunity. Commander Vextar looked up at Tay through his tears, his red eyes now dim with exhaustion and defeat. What will you do to us? He asked, his voice broken with despair. We deserve whatever punishment you choose. The question hung in the air as every alien in the terminal waited to learn their fate. They had all participated in or benefited from the systematic oppression of humanity, either directly or indirectly. Now they faced beings who could reshape reality with a thought, and they expected the worst, but Tay's expression had softened as his initial surge of awakened power began to stabilize. The angry fire in his silver eyes dimmed to a gentle glow as he looked down at the terrified alien commander. The boy who had been protecting his sister was still there beneath the cosmic power. We are not like you, he said simply, his voice now carrying sadness instead of threat. We do not seek revenge for its own sake, but things are going to change around the terminal. Other humans were beginning to show signs of their own awakening as the dormant genetic heritage spread from person to person like a gentle wave. Each awakening was different, reflecting the individual personality and experiences of the person. Involved a human engineer discovered he could understand and improve any technology just by touching it. A human artist found that she could create beauty that touched the souls of any being who saw her work. A human farmer realized he could make plants grow in the most hostile environments. The diversity of abilities was staggering, but they all shared the same underlying purpose: to help and protect rather than to harm or dominate. It was becoming clear that the creator race had designed their descendants to be the perfect guardians of galactic civilization. The ancient space station continued to respond to the human presence as more systems came online that had been dormant for eons. The very walls seemed to be welcoming their rightful inheritors home after an absence of millions of years. Word of what was happening at Nexus Prime Spaceport spread through the galaxy communication networks faster than light itself. News feeds on thousands of worlds began broadcasting shaky footage captured by alien travelers who had witnessed the impossible transformation. Emergency broadcasts interrupted regular programming as governments tried to understand what this meant for their civilizations. On the military command ship orbiting the station, Admiral Vex Ren watched the security feeds. With growing horror, his four eyes could not believe what they were showing him. Humans, beings his forces had been hunting for decades, were displaying powers that defied every law of physics. Their scientists understood the Admiral had built his entire career on the principle that humans were a threat to galactic peace and stability. His fleets had destroyed dozens of human colonies, and he had been praised as a hero for protecting civilized species from the human menace. But now everything he believed was crumbling before his eyes. Emergency meetings were being called in government centers across the galaxy as leaders struggled to comprehend the implications of this discovery. The Galactic Council, which had voted to classify humans as a hostile species, was now facing the possibility that they had been systematically murdering the descendants of their creators. Back in the terminal, Commander Vextar remained on his knees, his earlier arrogance completely shattered by the weight of his crimes against everything his training had taught him. He found himself hoping that these beings he had wronged might show him mercy. He did not deserve. What will you do to us? He asked again, his voice barely a whisper as he stared up at Tay. We deserve whatever punishment you choose. We have committed crimes against your people that cannot be forgiven. The other aliens in the crowd waited in terrified silence for the answer that would determine their fate. They had seen what human technology could do in the hands of the creators according to legend, and they knew that beings with such power could reshape entire star systems if they chose to. But Tay's expression remained calm and thoughtful as he considered the question. The silver light around him pulsed gently like a heartbeat as he felt the weight of speaking for all of humanity. The decision he made here would set the tone for how his awakened people would interact with the galaxy. We are not like you, he repeated, his words carrying a finality that made every alien present understand this was not just his opinion but a fundamental truth about human nature. We do not seek revenge for its own sake, but things are going to change as if responding to his words the other humans throughout the terminal began to exhibit their own awakening powers more clearly. Heo Jin moved toward a group of injured aliens who had been hurt in the initial panic. His hands glowed with healing energy as he instinctively began treating their wounds. The aliens he touched gasped in amazement as their pain disappeared and their injuries healed completely. His power did not just fix physical damage but seemed to restore them to perfect health, making them feel better than they had in years. So Young approached one of the communication terminals and placed her hands on the controls. Her eyes took on a golden sheen as her consciousness expanded to encompass the vast networks of information flowing through the galaxy. She could see and understand every message, every data stream, every secret communication happening across thousands of worlds. Even little Min-Ah was showing signs of remarkable abilities as her empathic powers grew stronger. She could sense and influence the emotional states of everyone around her, calming the fears of terrified aliens and helping them find peace in the midst of their confusion. I can feel their pain, she said softly, looking up at her brother with wise eyes that seemed far too old for her young face. They are scared because they do not understand what is happening. The awakening was spreading beyond just the humans in the terminal. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy of similar manifestations happening wherever humans were present. Human workers in alien factories suddenly found they could improve production efficiency by incredible amounts. Human servants in wealthy alien households discovered they could solve problems their employers had struggled with for years. A human child on a mining station in the Outer Rim touched a broken life support system and somehow repaired it, with just her thoughts saving the lives of thousands of alien miners. A human farmer on an agricultural world looked at dying crops and willed them back to health, feeding entire populations that had been facing starvation. The pattern was always the same. Instead of using their newfound abilities for destruction or revenge, the awakened humans instinctively chose to help and heal even those who had oppressed them. It was as if mercy and compassion were built into their very DNA, along with their incredible powers. This natural inclination toward benevolence made the watching aliens feel even more ashamed of their treatment of humanity. Here were beings who could have conquered the galaxy with ease, but instead chose to use their gifts to make life better for everyone around them. You hunted us because you were afraid of what we might become, Tay continued, addressing not just Vex Tar, but the growing crowd of aliens who were gathering to witness this historic moment. But look at us now. Even with the power to destroy you, all we choose to heal instead. His words were being broadcast across the galaxy now as news networks picked up the feed from the spaceport security cameras. Billions of beings were watching as the boy who had been struck for defending his sister became the voice of humanity. Awakening, the response from different species varied greatly. Some alien governments immediately began issuing apologies and calling for emergency peace talks. Others tried to deny what they were seeing, claiming it was some kind of elaborate hoax or alien propaganda. But those who had witnessed the transformation in person knew beyond any doubt that this was real. The power emanating from the awakened humans was unlike anything in their scientific databases, and the ancient technology throughout the station was responding to their presence in ways that proved their true heritage. On worlds throughout the galaxy, humans who had been living in hiding began to emerge from the shadows as they felt the call of their awakening genetic heritage. Human communities that had been scattered and broken began to reconnect as their enhanced abilities allowed them to communicate across vast distances. The age of human persecution was coming to an end, but what would replace it remained to be seen. The galaxy was about to enter a new era where the children of the creators had finally reclaimed their birthright, and no force in the universe could put them back into hiding. In the days that followed, the incident at Nexus Prime Spaceport would become known throughout the galaxy as the Great Awakening. The name spread from world to world, carried by traders and travelers who had witnessed the impossible transformation of the human species from refugees to God's human settlements across hundreds of worlds, reported similar manifestations of power as the dormant genetic heritage of the creator race finally activated after millions of years of suppression. The awakening was not violent or chaotic, but instead unfolded like a flower blooming as each human discovered abilities that had always been sleeping within their DNA. On the agricultural world of Kepler 7, a human farming family found they could make crops grow in soil that had been barren for decades. Their touch brought life to dead earth, and their presence made plants flourish beyond anything the alien colonists had ever seen. In the industrial cities of Titan Station, human workers discovered they could understand and improve alien technology just by looking at it. Machines that had been breaking down for years suddenly ran perfectly when humans were involved in their maintenance. Children were often the first to manifest abilities with their young minds more open to the genetic memories that were surfacing. A human girl on the mining world of Epsilon discovered she could see through solid rock and locate valuable minerals that scanners had missed. A human boy in the slums of New Coruscant found he could purify contaminated water with just a thought. The Galactic Enforcement Corps found itself in an impossible position. Their entire military structure had been built around containing and controlling what they believed to be a human threat, but now they faced beings who could reshape reality with a thought, yet chose to use their abilities for healing and protection rather than conquest. Admiral Thex Rand sat in his command chair, staring at reports that made no sense. According to everything he had been taught, human refugees were repairing damaged alien ships instead of sabotaging them. Human prisoners were healing their alien guards instead of trying to escape. Human settlements were sharing their newfound agricultural techniques with neighboring alien colonies instead of hoarding the advantages for themselves. It goes against everything we know about warfare and survival. The admiral muttered to his staff, how can a species gain ultimate power and then choose not to use it for dominance? His science officer, a young Altarian female named DRX Era, had been studying the reports for hours trying to find some logical explanation. She looked up from her datapad with confusion in her large purple eyes. According to the genetic analysis, sir, their DNA contains programming that makes aggression and domination physically painful for them. The more powerful they become, the stronger their compulsion to help others grows. It is as if they were designed to be perfect guardians. Commander Vextar had become an unlikely advocate for the humans he had once hunted. The transformation he had experienced in the terminal had left him fundamentally changed, as if seen through human eyes had rewired his entire understanding of morality and justice. He now traveled from world to world, testifying before courts and government assemblies about the true nature of the humans his forces had been persecuting. His accounts of experiencing human suffering firsthand had convinced many alien leaders that immediate action was needed to make amends. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session that lasted for weeks as representatives from every major species debated how to respond to this new reality. Some delegates called for immediate reparations and formal apologies, while others argued that the human awakening posed a new kind of threat to galactic stability. But the humans themselves seemed uninterested in political maneuvering or demands for compensation. Instead, they focused on practical matters, like establishing schools where young humans could learn to control their abilities safely and creating medical centers where their healing powers could help beings of all species. Tay and his family were relocated to a sanctuary world called Haven Prime, where humans from across the galaxy were gathering to form a new kind of community. The planet had been terraformed centuries ago, but abandoned after environmental disasters made it seemingly uninhabitable. However, the awakened humans found they could reverse the damage with their powers. Teams of human earth shapers worked to restore the soil while human weather workers repaired the damaged atmosphere. Human life-bringers reintroduced plants and animals that had been extinct for generations. The boy who had been slapped for defending his sister became a symbol of humanity, inherent nobility. His story was told on every world as proof that even godlike power could not corrupt those who truly understood the value of compassion. Men had grown in wisdom and ability far beyond her 8 years. Her empathic powers allowed her to help traumatized humans recover from years of persecution and fear. She also worked with alien children, teaching them that humans were not the monsters their parents had taught them to fear. So, Young established schools where human children could learn both their new abilities and the old knowledge that was returning to them through genetic memory. She worked with alien educators to create programs that would help all species understand their shared history. Jin became one of the most sought-after healers in the galaxy. As his abilities grew stronger with practice, he could cure diseases that had been considered incurable and repair injuries that should have been fatal, but he never charged for his services. Believing that healing was a gift meant to be shared freely, the sanctuary world became a model for what human alien cooperation could achieve when built on mutual respect rather than fear and domination. Alien scientists came to study human technology, while human researchers shared their discoveries freely with anyone who wanted to learn. As months passed, a galaxy slowly began to adapt to its new reality. The age of human persecution was officially ended when the Galactic Council passed the recognition accords, which acknowledged humanity's status as the inheritor species of the creators and granted them full rights and protections under galactic law. But more importantly, individual relationships between humans and aliens began to heal as both species learned to see each other as people rather than threats. Former enemies worked together on projects that benefited everyone, while children of different species played together without the fear and hatred their parents had. Carried Tay often stood on the observation deck of Haven Prime main city, looking up at the stars that his people were now free to explore without fear. In quiet moments like these, he could feel the presence of his ancient ancestors watching over them, proud that their children had chosen mercy over vengeance and love over fear. The galaxy was entering a new, golden age where the wisdom of the creators would once again guide the development of civilization. But this time it would be a civilization built on cooperation and mutual respect rather than domination and control, and in the end that made all the difference.